My name is Joe Jaworski, and I stay very involved in trying to balance Texas back to something resembling what it should be. Progress Texas is a leader in forcing that balance during my lifetime. And I'm trying to make a joke here, but the reality is we don't have that long. This needs to be happening now, and you guys are one of the most vital voices right now in the state fighting the authoritarian government that we find ourselves led by. The reality is Progress Texas gives me hope. I listen to what you say, and I understand it, and it gives us a rallying point. That's why Progress Texas matters.
It is May 4th, a new week and the first day of Teacher Appreciation Week. This is the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch, rapid response on the breaking news stories Texas progressives need to know. I'm your host for this week, Tatum Owens, and here at Progress Texas, we amplify progressive values, leaders, and actions. Through our no paywall podcasts and digital media, we reach millions of Texans monthly, and that's made possible by folks like you who invest in independent, progressive media by Texans for Texans. Our thanks to Wayne Bannister, Margaret Stewart, and Melinda Jemison for their ongoing, sustaining support. Starting us off with the local municipal elections that happened on Saturday, May 2nd. A reminder to look up your local news and see how that panned out near you, but for our statewide audience, we'll note one race that needs to be shared. Alejandro Serrano and Colleen de Guzman at the Texas Tribune reported on the special election in Southeast Texas to replace Senator Brandon Creighton in Texas Senate District 4. This is with Republican Brett Legion defeating Democrat Ron Angeletti by a large margin for now to rematch later in November. Republican leadership are rallying around this win, puffing up a red win in one of the reddest seats in the Senate. It seems another recent special election is still ringing in their ears, wanting to outshine Senator Taylor Ramet's victory up north. Another piece of this puzzle and special election extends to the fight in our public higher education systems. You'll recall that the reason this election occurred is because the anti-DEI Brandon Creighton was tapped by Governor Abbott, who also asked Legion, by the way, to become the chancellor of the Texas Tech University system. Perfect place for him to deliver his racist and exclusionary agenda. And where has that led? A funeral for Texas Tech taking place this week. Students engaged in Advancing Texas, or a SEAT, an advocacy organization building, quote, a movement of students demonstrating youth visibility and policy making, unquote, is holding the event during their Board of Regents meeting. They say Texas Tech will be, quote, mourned by those who believe a university should be a place where all ideas and all people are encouraged to thrive, unquote. They name Creighton as the final blow to academic freedom at the university after death by 1,000 other cuts. Hats, gloves, veils, and parasols will be provided, and you can join them from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. on this Thursday, May 7th in Lubbock at the System Admin Building. Testimony required by May 5th. Kudos to students fighting back against one of the worst proponents of bad bills in the Texas Ledge and hardest anti-DEI heads in Texas, and looking forward to seeing attendance at this SEAT event. Bringing it back to elections in Texas, some recommended reading from Eleanor Klibanoff and Gabby Birnbaum at the Texas Tribune that revisits the SCOTUS Louisiana v. Calais decision from last week, of which our team recorded a podcast with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and Texas Civil Rights Project. Check it out by scrolling down the feed. The Tribune journalists give you a review of how the National Voting Rights Act was chipped away at, how it ties back to Texas, and how it's impacted our state over the years, with President and native Texan LBJ passing the landmark legislation in 1965. One quote that gets at the heart of this must-read article is from Nina Perales, who argued in a Section 2 VRA case in Texas for a current Republican district's map, saying to the Tribune, quote, a lot of the districts that we see in a map today were created to make sure that minority communities were not accidentally chopped up and that the minority communities could have a voice in some parts of the state. Unquote. All to say that the Supreme Court has made their decision, and it certainly will have far-reaching consequences. But still, Texas has more congresspeople of color than ever before, and that's a number that we will have to fight for that much harder now to grow and sustain. Section 2 is still in our election system, present in our maps that had to abide by protective regulations to ensure racial equity, despite extreme gerrymandering in the past that will be enabled again with ease by the Roberts Court to redraw for Republican racist favor. Moving to upcoming elections and looking at the U.S. Senate candidate and Texas AG, Ken Paxton, who, you'll remember, sued Act Blue back in April. Well, now he's being countersued for alleged politically motivated investigations and litigation. From Ken Paxton? Oh, well, I never. Eleanor Klibanoff at the Texas Tribune provided updates on this story, sharing that Act Blue alleges Paxton jumped to investigate the main Democratic donor fundraising platform just one day after Democratic opponent for Senator John Cornyn's seat, Rep. James Talarico, announced record-breaking fundraising numbers with $2.5 billion raised in 24 hours. Still crazy, whopping amount. Lawrence Oliver, chief legal officer at Act Blue, said, quote, "The timing of Paxton fighting for his political life in his run in U.S. Senate and his use of the Attorney General's office to attack Blue should not be lost on anyone. He is wasting taxpayer dollars to benefit his political ambitions," unquote. Klibanoff details the repeated attempts from Paxton to investigate the fundraising platform for years now. In 2023, when Congress put out a mandate, in 2025, when Trump did the same, and now once again. Crooked Ken at it again, unfortunate that our top-ranking legal officer in the state can't be trusted to uphold the law for its own sake and wields it for his own battles instead, allegedly. Meanwhile, aforementioned Democratic opponent, Rep. James Talarico, had a happier weekend at Texas's oldest historically black college, Paul Quinn College, founded in 1872 by African Episcopal ministers to educate formerly enslaved people, Gromer Jeffers Jr. at the Dallas Morning News reports. If you've been paying attention to this Senate race, you know voters are very concerned about how to unite and deliver the first statewide Democratic win in Texas in decades. Coalitions are split currently, with polling last week showing that Talarico polls well for Latinos and independents, but we know, and Talarico has also explicitly said at HBCU Prairie University as of last week, that Talarico's win is dependent. It only happens with him appealing to the backbone of the Democratic Party in Texas, to black voters. Especially true coming after his primary against the amazing Congresswoman Crockett. And as it should, with SCOTUS handing down a reversal of civil rights legislation that will make it more difficult for black and brown voters to have a say. His appearance at this HBCU appears part of that courting of voters. Jeffers shared some of Talarico's commencement speech remarks, focusing on faith, service, and ties that bind us together. Talarico says we are in a, quote, spiritual crisis, unquote, exacerbated by corrupt politicians and billionaires trying to divide us. He addressed the young graduates as a former teacher, inviting them to live out of the university's roots of faith, service, and love, while also acknowledging the young audience's circumstances grown up underneath, calling disillusionment with the American dream a superpower, saying, quote, "Being disillusioned means being freed from illusions, to see reality, to know the truth," unquote. Going forward, one thing is certain. We need clear eyes ahead, and for that to happen, we must be the party of a true multiracial democracy. Otherwise, what distinguishes us in opposition to the lies promised and corrupt, racist policy and rhetoric delivered by Cornyn and Paxton? That's all for today, but before you go, don't forget the statewide primary runoffs that John and Ken will face off during takes place later this month on May 26th. For the midterm runoffs, early voting will begin on May 18th. More on all of this at our carefully crafted voting information website, govotexas.org. And there's a nice online tool from the Texas Tribune that shows you exactly who will be on your runoff ballot based on your party and address. See that link in the show notes. And we have not one but two live events on the calendar right now in both Dallas and the Houston area. First, we'll be in Cypress at the Creekwood Grill for a live podcast taping with Cy-Fair ISD board members, and we want you there, but seating is limited. So check out that link in the bio to RSVP for Wednesday, May 20th. See you there. And thank you to sponsors Otis Evagaru and Sean Finney. Here at Progress Texas, we're also getting ready for our 16th anniversary celebration in Dallas with drinks, light bites, and a fun review of the highlights of our successes over the last few years. Thank you to our sponsors Howard Cleon, Charles Zeller, Alex Andrade, the Honorable Dick Levine, the Honorable Bill Peterson, and Mark Yagjian. Save the date, which is Tuesday, June 16th, and see the link in the show notes to reserve your spot. If you check us out at those live events, make sure to have some merch to match your values as well by looking at our web store store. Live and ready for you to grab Humans Against Abbott, Y'all Means All, and Resist shirts, stickers, and buttons. Hit the link in the show notes to support your favorite podcast network today. That is the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch. Links to all of these original stories can be found in our show notes. And when lies in Texas are well funded by the far right, your support for fact-based reporting is needed and appreciated. I'm Tatum Owens. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again tomorrow.